effectively.
Just following on, I'm interested in how much compliance there is with, responding to inquiries and questions. I can imagine it's the way you've explained it. It's sort of sponsored through a leading NGO, and they will be able to trigger certainly the victims, and they will trigger supportive mechanisms. But then they would need to talk to probably state authorities.
Yeah, and it's been.
Are they fairly compliant?
Yeah, so all 3 reports. The committee puts a paragraph in saying how welcoming the state was when they come. They need state consent to go in. You can't just go in unilaterally. And all 3 inquiries report that the state has been very helpful in putting them in contact. Because in Canada's the one I know best is because I am Canadian. Putting them in touch with RCMP officers to talk about, and police officers, with justice officials, with court officials. So the state does do a lot of legwork to help put the committee in touch with state people to get their perspective as well. So it is encouraging that states don't attack the legitimacy of this exercise.
Well, Canada is very special. I mean, it has a very transparent state. It has a very,
Mexico and the Philippines the same way though. The committee reported that the state was again helpful in putting in touch with the right people in government to get the evidence they wanted. So there is this. The states aren't attacking this procedure or trying to dismiss it. They are on board with it. Why? Because I guess they must believe in the International Human Rights Project. They want to be seen as complying with CEDAW. But they are willing to let the committee in and help and assist in logistics of trying to meet the right people.
I'd have to make a mournful statement. I mean, I'm ashamed of myself every time I see these pictures. My mind goes to the situation in, say, India, South Asia, how we can make this happen. For example, in many of the countries of South Asia, including India, they are now shrinking the space for NGOs. In fact, NGOs are being treated as enemies of India. So when I was on the CEDAW Indian Forum for many years, and we get excited by the thought that we have a law. It was celebrated when it happened. But the countries, either the governments won't do it, and now we have multinationals with garment factories and exploitative places where CEDAW is being trashed like fish. So sometimes one cannot help thinking that when you make a presentation which is so brilliant, that the operational side of it in many of these countries are shrinking. And I'm not saying I have a solution to that unless we rise with revolutions. But India is a case of such sorrow because the government is now attacking NGOs, women's groups, left and right. And I don't know about Bangladesh, but I think it's even worse in Bangladesh.
Yeah.
And Hamida used to be on the CEDAW committees and so on. And it's so frustrating, actually.
It's one of the biggest frustrations in working on this area, in talking to people about when I say what my work is about, is the disconnect between what happens at the international forums in Geneva and what happens on the ground. And connecting what CEDAW's committee does, its great recommendations, to actual change is still a bridge that needs a lot of building. And it's incredibly frustrating because they do such great work and they're trying so hard, but states don't listen. Our states do the exact opposite. And there's no tool the committee really has to try to enforce these great recommendations it's making.
Could I abuse the position of chair and ask a sort of positive version of Devki's point? When you do find that recommendations have been at least accepted, who exactly is it within the state? Because we tend to talk about the state, and you talk about progress within the state, but states are very complicated things. And I wonder whether you've thought about what are the progressive elements and where are they located inside states?
That's a really good question because for both the Philippines and Canada, they're federal system. Canada's federal, and in the Philippines, the health had been delegated to the power for healthcare been delegated to cities instead of the federal government. Who actually has responsibility for making these changes? Provinces, cities, or the state? And the committee doesn't. It's a principle of international law that they don't peel back who's actually responsible within the state. They just take the state as is. But when thinking, I think that's probably another weakness of the inquiry procedure, is that it doesn't talk to the actor actually in charge. So it says that Canada, you have to do X, Y, and Z, but Canada's constitutional makeup means that federal government can't actually do that. The provincial government only has the power. So I think that's a weakness in that it doesn't, why a domesticated version would be stronger, because it understands how the power plays between different entities within government better than the CEDAW committee. And that's just a sort of deeply entrenched principle of international law, that the state's responsible for everything within its jurisdiction. So if the city does something wrong at international level, the state's still the one responsible. So it doesn't do that nuanced thinking that is necessary to probably pinpoint which actor needs to have the responsibility to make the structural change.
If I may add to that, there are monitoring groups that monitor CEDAW and submit shadow reports. So those groups are then following up what CEDAW committee has recommended and taking it up with different departments, whether it's local or national.
Yeah, I mean, NGOs are such an important part of the story of CEDAW.
I was just thinking that it seems to me that with the Philippines and Mexico, I think Canada is an exception, but with those two, because it was happening at a local level, actually the compliance and openness of the federal system, they may have seen it as extra help to be able to pressure the local level. And so that makes me wonder if the systematic abuses were because of national level policy, whether you might have a more difficult situation getting in.
Yeah, I never thought about that. That is a good idea. Maybe the federal state takes that on because it's a tool to strengthen their negotiations or discussions with the city or the province or the local authority. And what might happen if it's a national policy? I'm probably skeptical, and that it probably it would be more resistance. Unfortunately, there haven't been that many inquiries yet, but as this goes on over time, I imagine we'd see that resistance. So if someone came in to try to attack austerity in the UK, and that's a national policy, right? How likely is a Conservative government to allow an inquiry procedure into austerity in the UK? It would be a big question mark.
One suggestion. Hamida would tell you, we have a South Asian Human Rights Committee. We found it with great difficulty. And now Hamida used to be on member and I was a founder, and now we have a lawyer who is the chairperson. It would be very interesting if the Oxford Human Rights Hub did a kind of a study of it and their founding, why and where they are now. It would give us some kind of the political element of putting human rights on the ground. There's a political element there, not only a legal element. And that would be a learning experience for all of us. Not only on gender, but on...
Yeah, the interaction between domestic and international.
I mean, many feminists are on that committee. Asma Jahangir and others.
That'd be fabulous.
I mean, I make this suggestion which I have no right to make. But if you have an institution like that, I can't help it. I feel greedy. I feel, why don't they do that?
Okay. No dearth of suggestions, very valuable and useful suggestions for further research, but also for action in many different ways. And we've had also no dearth of strategies for empowerment through the economy, through education and polar paradox, resolving that, and now through anti-discrimination. So thank everybody, all the discussants and all the presenters, very much for an excellent session.
Great, thank you so much, Barbara. Coffee's there.